The most serious story of the week, no doubt, the 4-year ban for Irish trainer Stephen Mahn. It was his second significant ban, this one more significant, after he was accused of, well, he was found guilty of animal cruelty, Dave. Yeah,
this is a really concerning case, and it's concerning in more than one way. The facts of it are, and excuse me, I'm consulting my notes so I get this right. Stephen Mahn was banned for 4 years. There were 2 stable inspections. The ban was under the umbrella of disrepute, essentially. There were 2 inspections for a horse who's referred to as Animal A, who was euthanized, but the charges related to welfare issues relating to 11 horses in all, and so he was given a 4-year ban. That obviously in itself is appalling, not the ban but the offence. But what I think is arguably more worrying is the fact that in 2008 he was given 4 months and a €1,000 fine for a case involving a horse, Pike Bridge, who had eaten away at her own legs because of a tendon issue and was rendered unable to stand. And I think most people watching this programme would think that 4 months and a €1,000 fine for that would be
well, that clearly was insufficient, to say the least, and it clearly didn't work either because he's been banned again. What do you have to do to get a life ban?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's when, obviously and rightly, welfare is a big topic among the wider world looking in to horse racing, isn't it? And if things like this aren't dealt with robustly, and I think in that sense we are dealing of lifetime bans, of casting people out of the sport to say you can't operate in this sport and we won't miss you. I think that has to be the way forward. Otherwise, how, if the racing industry in different countries, if they can't take this issue seriously, then how can they expect people looking in to think that we are a responsible sport and a responsible industry?
Stephen Mahn got a 4-year ban, but almost all correspondents appeared to agree that a lifetime ban would have been a more appropriate sanction, given it was his second offence. Let's talk about watering this week. Epsom watered during the course of the week because the ground threatened to get very quick. Then obviously there was a lot of rain on Friday, and plenty of people weren't happy about that. I, on social media, have made my feelings clear, but you can have your view on whether Epsom were right to water to the extent that they did.
Right. Well, clerks of the course are often easy targets for the media. We can criticise them. We know they've got to talk to us. It's not like talking to a trainer or a jockey who'll say, no, I read what you said about me. You know, I'm not talking to you. In this instance, you've got, on the back of a wet May, or the first half of May, the sun comes out. Andrew Cooper, who is one of the most experienced and I think one of the most respected, well, undoubtedly one of the most, if not the most respected clerk of the course, explained that the ground would have been firm had he not watered, and the forecast on Friday was between 1 and 4 millimetres, and they got 11. I just don't see what he was a very frustrated figure on Friday, and was explaining in a businesslike manner how he had gone through the process. But I just don't see what you're supposed to do. If the weather forecasters, in a sense, are like horse racing tipsters. They're dealing with data and they're making predictions on that data. Those predictions didn't come to pass, in fact, on Friday. I just don't see what he's supposed to do. I really don't. Because if you then come out, if you then don't water because the forecast might be wrong and you've got firm ground, well, then you do get pelters, and I think deservedly you get pelters. I can't... We looked at this an awful lot on Friday and discussed it and wrote about it, but I'm not saying this because I want to cosy up to Andrew Cooper. I just don't see what else he could and should have done.
Yeah, I put my head above the parapet on social media, immediately regretted it, because what I found extraordinary is that people were suggesting that there's some sort of conspiracy, there's some sort of establishment conspiracy to maintain a status that shouldn't be maintained. I just don't get that at all. There's a guy who's been there 25 years. His job is to produce a good, fast racing surface, safe, fast racing surface.
Before we go on to the talking point, when we watch the weather forecast these days, you know, we'll look at, you know, Louise Lear, and you'll see the prediction of the following days. These little sort of wisps of cloud and rain on the graphics, and you think, oh, that's just going to miss Forest Hill. I'll go out on the bike. It's going over Dulwich, but I'll be all right. And then, of course, you go out on the bike, and by the time you're soaked. You're soaked. And you look at the TV, the graphics, and they look very impressive. But really, it's the same old world as when Michael Fish was putting those clouds and suns and rain with stickers on a map of the British Isles. And so...
And then there was a hurricane, and he said, don't worry about it, there'll be no storm tonight.
They're working with data. They made a prediction. The prediction proved to be inaccurate, and that's what happened. You know, this might not be a popular view. There will be people say, oh, you know, what a pathetic attempt to deal with that issue.
You're a gravy-trained media man trying to cosy up to a clerk of the course. Spineless.
So you don't water. They get 1 millimetre of rain. You get a rash of horses that come out on Derby Day, and you also get reference point 1, the wider world talking about
horses breaking down.
Welfare in horse racing. Who does that serve exactly?
No disagreement from here, unfortunately. Mahaffeth was the horse who did come out because the ground was considered to be too dead for him. William Haggis said he accepted the ground wasn't soft, but he said he didn't think it was a race he could win, and therefore he pulled the horse out. Was he right to take him out?
Yeah, I think he was.
Do you?
Yes, I do. I think that there are two parts of this answer. One is, do you think the ground was... do you think it would have been worth waiting? No, let's face it, he pulled the horse out after the second race. In his judgment, the ground was too soft for Mahaffeth to do himself justice. Let's not underestimate William Haggis's affection for the Derby. His quote said that. He's won the race 25 years earlier with Sharmit in '96. He is married to Lester Pigot's daughter. So I don't think we're thinking of like, well, look, it's only the Derby, we'll go to Ascot. This is a race that's...
But has he been too cautious here?
Well, he's got...
At some point, because you've only got one Derby, and you've got one horse and one chance. I'm not saying you throw caution to the wind, but do you have to take a calculated risk?
True, but he's also got one Derby colt. Otherwise, he'd have run more. Now, he's in a very different position than, for example, Aidan O'Brien or even Charlie Appleby, horses with trainers that have got more than one Derby colt in that stable. When we say Derby colt, we mean a middle distance horse, a 3-year-old that is capable of winning 1.5 mile Group 1 races. I think what you're saying, I think, is, or what might be inferred from what you say, is that William Haggis doesn't really rate the... No, I'm not. I'm saying that it could be, I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm saying that could be inferred from what you say. I think that in the circumstances of a stable like his that is looking in the medium term to Ascot, to the Curragh, to maybe the Arc at the end of the season, I think that in his own mind, and he will tell us, I'm sure, whether we are right or wrong, that in the circumstances, running a horse on ground that he deemed to be unsuitable would jeopardise those future targets. He's a trainer of huge experience and of huge achievement. If that's his view, I don't feel qualified to argue with that. I think it's a huge shame, and I can bang on forever about how I love the Derby, but I don't think William Haggis loves it any less than I do.
He doesn't, and he was very emotional taking the horse out. He clearly wanted him to run. It's just a question of whether all those targets in the future however many of those you win and do well, are they any of them more important than the Derby?
Are the chances of
even if you're responsibly nurturing a horse's career, surely that's the day.
Are the chances of winning? Are the
most.
chances of winning those races jeopardised by running in the Derby? He thought so.
Yeah.
And
the answer to that,
the whole issue.
The answer to that is, of course, we haven't got a clue.
That's the whole issue.
Really knows.
If he thought the horse would come out, run in the Derby, he didn't go on the ground, never mind, he'll win the Irish equivalent at the Curragh on June the 26th. He would have run Mahafford in the Derby, wouldn't he?
Weirdly, I almost think it's a braver decision on his part to have taken the horse out than to have left him in. And I'll tell you why, because so many things now have to go perfectly in order to justify yesterday's decision. It has to be fast ground at Ascot. He has to be sound for the next however many races. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
So actually, I almost thought, whilst I wouldn't have taken him out, I almost kind of thought, well, you've actually been quite brave taking him out because so many things have now got to go right in order to justify that decision.
And subsequent events, in weeks and months to come, there will be plenty of people on social media all too keen to pile in over this, won't there?
Yeah. Yeah.
When the horse doesn't go out and then run up a sequence of Group 1 wins.
He loves that horse. He loves this race, and he desperately wanted to run him. I'd have run him. You wouldn't have run him, but that's why we do this show. Holly Doyle didn't have a ride in the Derby. Is this a talking point?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. She rode a double at Epsom on Friday, and in a tabloid sense took the riding honours, because she was the only jockey to ride a double. She is, as of this morning, 5th in the jockey standings under the what do you call it? The champion, the jockeys' championship that goes from.
Sheen Murphy didn't ride in the race.
I know he didn't, but
and World Horse Racing got the poor guy to commentate on Adam Kirby riding the horse he should have won.
You're in a funny mood this morning. Do two wrongs make a right then?
Why is it a wrong?
Because they didn't at Pilgrim Upper.
But why is it a wrong, though?
Because she is operating at a strike rate of 16%, which is about the average of those jockeys around her. She's 5th in the table. She's ridden 21 winners from 128 rides in that time. She is clearly one of the...
Is your position in the Jockeys' Championship the key indicator as to your suitability for big race rides? If that was the case, Frankie Dettori wouldn't be getting any rides at all.
No, come on, because that's like saying Serena. That's like saying Serena Williams can't play tennis because she doesn't go to all the tournaments anymore, and you know that's bunkum. The point with Holly Doyle is that it's anyone can see over the last couple of years that she is one of the top half dozen jockeys riding in Britain. Certainly one of the top 10. OK, if someone says, well, don't say 6. Hang on. I know it's your show. She's had 5 timers at Kempton and Windsor, including in group races. She's a Group 1 winning jockey. Now, obviously, trainers have their contractual arrangements, and that's how most of those rides are carved up. But it's certainly a talking point. And I'm not saying this for waving a flag for diversity, which, of course, I believe in, like everybody else. I'm just merely saying that on the nuts and bolts of what she does on horseback, irrespective of her gender, it is a talking point that she didn't have a ride in the Derby. Kazoo Derby.
And is it a talking point that Sheen Murphy didn't have a ride in the Derby?
Yeah, probably too. But I mean,
so why didn't you put Sheen Murphy up there?
Well, because if you'd got here a bit earlier, you could have put his name on the talking points as well. But actually, he did have a ride. He did have a ride in the race, and then he lost it because of a domino effect. Holly Doyle didn't have a ride in the race to start off with.
She might well have had a ride in the race if Aidan O'Brien had fielded 5 or 6 horses, because we saw Aidan was quite happy to use it at the Dante meeting, where she rode the horse in the Dante very well. So he only had 1 horse in the race. He had Bolshoi Ballet. He released through ITV's Matt Chapman a picture afterwards of Bolshoi Ballet's off hind leg struck into quite nastily. Now, whether or not that was the sole reason for Bolshoi Ballet's disappointment, we simply don't know.
Yes, I mean, afterwards, Aidan told us he couldn't offer an explanation, that without making excuses, the soft ground might have been a factor. Ryan Moore said afterwards that he felt the ground was a factor, that the horse's improvement this spring had been on fast ground at Leopardstown in the Ballysacks and the Derrinstown Stud Tubby trial. This was an interesting story, this how it unfolded, because last Saturday I put a piece in the Mirror saying Aidan O'Brien could match his record number of...
Yeah, wasn't that was a Mirror exclusive, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Aidan to run 8 in Derby.
Yes, and supported by a quote from the great man. Of course, 8 horses having taken on authorised in 2007. And then, of course, Aidan did match his own record for runners in the Derby, but at the bottom end of the scale rather than at the top. So I was right in a way. It was strange how it was strange how the story unfolded, though, because at a Zoom call with the media on Tuesday, Aidan said the pace will suit high definition. Obviously, you know, after his staying on effort in the Dante, and so it was strange. It was certainly the other thing that we're used to seeing is a Ballydor pacemaker, isn't it? For years, the trainer has said it's the fairest result. We think we've got the best horse, so we don't want anything. We don't want any tactical mess ups. So we run a pacemaker, and there wasn't even one of those.
Do you think this owes anything to do with any antipathy towards racing here or the Derby or our poor prize money? I mean, Aidan's talked quite a bit about good prize money in France and incentives to go there quite a bit with some of the better horses, or not?
I'd be extremely surprised. You know, you look at the Coolmore's recent representation in that race. If for most of us, it's been too many. I thought it was great that they had one personally from you know, harking back to the old days of when each stable sent their Derby colt to Epsom on the first Tuesday, Wednesday or Saturday of June, or indeed in mid-May, as they did.
Greg Fairley, a name you probably haven't heard for an awful long time. He got a 12-year ban a decade or so ago for passing information for reward. Yes,
and also failing to ensure horses had received the best possible placing, a charge that he denies.
So what's happened this week?
Well, the interesting thing is Greg Fairley is 33 now. We've talked...
Still pretty young,
yeah. Adam Kirby is 32. You know, these should be, certainly in the old days, they were the golden years of a jockey's career. He was given 12 years for that in 2011. He's keen to come back into the sport, and he has been allowed to do that as a part-time work rider to Sandy Thompson, who has also employed his father Andrew for the past 3 years. So it is a step back. Whether that will be followed by another step back, whether we might ever see Greg Fairley riding in races again, I don't know. It's quite interesting, though, isn't it? That I don't think necessarily that people would have a problem with 12 years for a serious integrity offence. It certainly looks odd, doesn't it, when we look at the name at the top of the talking points there. 4 months and then 4 years for very serious
animal welfare
issues.
Two different regulatory bodies.
Yes, of course, but also a sport that is broadly similar, isn't it? You know, and so I think that's quite an interesting thing. I'm personally not one of these people who thinks that wrongdoers should be cast out of the sport or society for good. Justice has to be even-handed, doesn't it? And I hope that in this case, under the supervision of Sandy Thompson, his father, Greg Fairley can continue to progress. He's 33. There are still years to come.
And the man for whom he rode the bulk of his winners will be in that seat in just a few moments' time. Mark Johnston, odds fluctuations finally. Trainers, including Richard Hughes, have been slightly plaintive this week about horses' odds fluctuating dramatically and it leading to strained relations with owners whose expectations are being subverted by what's happening in the market. What do you think of this?
This was quite an interesting story from Chris Cook in the trade paper, because and I can't really offer a solution to it, but what happened in the case of Richard Hughes, is it, I've written this down, mythical star, ran at Lingfield and was 16 to 1 when the horse left for the races, and when they got, when he came out in the paddock, was 7 to 2. Richard Hughes had said, I told the owner, Bill Bailey, I don't know if that's the musical man, Bill Bailey.
Doubt it.
But he said normal stuff from a trainer to owner. He's all right, but today's not the day. We'll be happy if he beats a few home. And, of course, this then leads to some sort of issue between owner and trainer to say, well, are you giving this to me straight, because the horse was 16s and he's now 7 to 2, and so I don't really know how this is going to be resolved. Either bookmakers need to be less sensitive and not just collapse prices the moment that there's a sniff of support for them, or maybe owners have to take on board that these things happen, and that the trainer is not having it right off behind their backs. Interestingly, just talking to Jane Chapel-Hyam in the run up to Saffron Beach about Belosa at Newmarket at the Craven meeting, who went off, I think, 7 to 2 joint favourite, having been 25 to 1, and Jane said, you know, you'd think from that we had thousands on, and that, you know, we were all rolling around in money. She said, I had a nibble. Couple of lads in the office, in the yard, probably had 10s or 20s, wow. But nothing like the sums you would expect that would make a price contract from 25s to 7 to 2 at one of the first big meetings of the flat season. We're not talking about, you know, Kempton on a Wednesday night in January,
as so often with these markets, it's not how many people, it's who.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there you are. And you probably answered our own question, haven't we? There, Dave. Thank you very much. That was Dave Yates.
Is that me?
That's you done.
Just, I'd apologise for not having any socks on before I go. Normally, I'm against gentlemen wearing shoes with no socks. These aren't leather ones. They're espadrilles. I bought 2 expensive pairs of shoes over the last couple of weeks, and now I can't get a shoe on because they've hurt my feet so much. So apologies there.
Dave, thank you. Mark Johnston is wearing socks, and he'll be along in a moment. Subscribe to Racing TV to be notified when more Luck on Sunday videos are appearing online, and don't forget to join me for the show every Sunday morning from 9 o'clock with the best guests.